This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones, we learnt that Reynard of Harburg had left Trevance a week earlier, taking a company of the Brethren of the Purifying Light through the Dragon's Tooth Pass to join the mustering rebel forces at Cerro Morthal. On his arrival, he was met by his trusted lieutenant and Lord Polmir's steward, Maelor, who Reynard had tasked with recovering the final Hellstone, the Eye of Selethra. Maelor reported that during his attempt, the Eye of Selethra's keeper, the mage Lamorda, had escaped, taking the Hellstone with her, but that he had managed to capture Lamorda's apprentice, Cirque. Back at Penmelkine and in the present, the companions discovered a chamber containing 4 mummified corpses, whom Valen supposed were the wardens of the vault. The men appeared to have died of starvation, suggesting that they had been deliberately or otherwise been trapped within Penmelkine. But more curiously, was an enchanted torque placed in reverse about each of their necks. Deciding not to disturb anything, the companions returned to the entrance hall, where they discovered the door to another chamber that had been previously shut was now open. Just as they were about to investigate, the companions were attacked by a possessed creature that used to be the 5th Warden. The creature used its gaze attack to temporarily incapacitate Lena, who, through the visions of hell she experienced, has been permanently traumatized. A drawn-out fight ensued until the creature launched itself at the freshly recovered Lena, delivering a devastating attack which left the cleric badly wounded. But just as the fiend was about to rip the cleric's throat out, Beric cleaved the creature's head, ending the battle and saving Lena's life. Chapter 61 Part 1 Day 61 Evening. Party status: Beric, 49 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 16 out of 34 hit points. Valen, 21 out of 21 hit points. Talion, 27 out of 27 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Charm Animal, Push, Shield, Soothe, Revive, Clairvoyance, Ignite, and Dragon's Breath. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, Imbue, and Lullaby. Lena can pray for 2 first-level miracles, 2 second-level miracles, 2 third-level miracles, 1 fourth-level miracle, and 1 5th-level miracle. Stillness once again settled upon the hall, cloaking it like a shroud, as though the violence that had raged only moments before were nothing but a fleeting nightmare. Only small, strangled gasps disturbed the silence, echoing like ghostly whispers through the chamber. Valen rushed forward, shoving aside the headless carcass of the monstrous thing that had collapsed over Lena's supine form. The cleric's neck was torn and savaged, marred by deep gouges left by the fiend's claws and teeth. A dark pool of blood spread beneath her head, soaking onto the cold stone floor like spilled ink upon a parchment. The mage dropped to his knees, pressing his fingers against the gaping wound in a desperate attempt to staunch the flow. Tears spill freely down his cheeks, his face a mask of horror and helpless grief.
"Lena!"
he cried hoarsely, his voice cracking with raw desperation as the colour drained from Lena's ashen face. With a panicked motion, he yanked the strap of his pack from his shoulder and flung it towards Talion with his free hand.
"Get me bandages!"
he commanded, urgency sharpening his tone. The bard dropped to his knees and began frantically rifling through the bag. Then, Valen felt it. A faint, cold touch upon his blood-slicked hand. Startled, he looked down and met Lena's gaze. Despite the horrific wounds raking her throat, her eyes shimmered with an eerie calm. A quiet resolve that defied her condition. With surprising tenderness, she pushed his hand away from her neck, allowing the blood to flow unimpeded once more. Her fingers weakly found her holy symbol, and she clutched it with fragile determination. Her lips began to move, softly, silently, uttering whispers too faint for the ear to catch. Moments passed, heavy and tense, and then, suddenly, her eyes flared wide, filled with a light that was not of the world. Her face transformed, awash with rapture that transcended pain and fear. The bleeding halted. Torn flesh knit itself back together. Muscle, sinew, and skin, all mending with divine precision, until no trace of the trauma remained. Lena slowly sat upright, her movements reverent, almost ceremonial. Valen leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers, his tears now those of relief.
"I thought I would lose you,"
he confessed, his voice choked with emotion. Lena leaned back slightly, her expression serene. She offered the mage a faint but resolute smile.
"I knew in my heart that the Nine would not abandon me,"
she spoke with unwavering conviction.
"Solon restored me with his grace."
Her gaze determined and filled with purpose, a fire kindling behind her eyes.
"And in return, he bid me to do his will."
She turned her head, eyes lingering on Beric, then Talion, before returning to meet Valen's.
"I must cleanse this place of corruption."
From a purely game mechanics perspective, Lena was never really in trouble. She still had 16 hit points remaining. But before the start of this episode, I rolled for Lena to pray for the miracle of Cure Light Wounds to heal herself. And that roll was a natural 1, a critical success. My house rule for prayer checks is that a natural 1 results in a great blessing from the gods, a special reward, if you like, for the cleric's piety. There are 6 possible blessings in this situation, details of which you can find at legendofthebones.blogspot.com. I rolled a 3, the result being that the cleric is healed for 1d6 hit points per level, or a permanent disfigurement, for example an amputated limb or blindness, is reversed, as decided by the referee. Now, tempting as it was to heal Lena of the lightning scars which cover her body, it was much more prudent, and I think fitting, that instead she would be healed for 7d6 hit points, which took her back to full health. All of this led me to make the scene more dramatic than it might have otherwise been, but I hope you can forgive my indulgence. On a more practical note, after Lena was injured, I feared the party would need to rest overnight, and thus lose valuable time. But with this intervention from the gods, they now won't need to. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It so often feels like the dice have a story they want to tell. Now, while I'm here behind the screen, this is a level up episode for Canute and Talion. As a reminder, Although Canute isn't with the main party at the moment, he still levels up as normal. So starting with Canute, rolling a d8 for new hit points. A 4. Canute's hit point total rises to 40. Let's see whether he gets any ability score increases. Strength 5. Intelligence 1. Wisdom 2. Dexterity 4. Constitution 2. This isn't looking good. And Charisma. A 1. Well, that was a pretty disappointing level up. However, after much deliberation, I have decided to overhaul the fighter class. For some time, I felt that fighters get a raw deal compared with other classes. Now, the fighter class is an area of difference between original BX D&D and old school essentials, which is my usual rules reference. OSE includes level to hit bonuses, whereas BX recommends additional attacks for higher level fighters. In addition, it's unclear in OSE whether the level to hit bonuses apply to melee attacks only or missile attacks as well. I have always interpreted these bonuses as only applying to melee attacks, which does tend to discourage fighters from being archers. So, going forward in my game, fighters will now get access to their level to hit bonuses earlier and more incrementally. Secondly, from level 4, fighters will start to get an armor class bonus, reflecting their increasing ability to dodge, parry and block blows. It has never made sense to me that a 9th level fighter is just as easy to hit as a 1st level fighter. The other major change is that from level 5, fighters can choose from one of 6 combat specialisms, one of which is Archer. I won't go into them all here, but the specialism for both Canute and Beric is Sword and Shield. Both will receive the following combat benefits, but only when using this specific combination. Firstly, rolling a natural 1 does not result in a critical failure. Secondly, an additional +1 bonus to hit is applied to attacks. And thirdly, a shield bash may be used in place of a normal attack, dealing 1d4 plus strength bonus damage, and with a 2 in 6 chance of knocking the target down, causing them to lose their next action and move. However, this skill can only be used against humanoid targets which are of a similar size or less, and can only be used against enemies of equal or lower hit dice. You can find a full class description with all the combat specialisms at legendofthebones.blogspot.com. We will catch up with how Canute is getting on soon enough, but now let's level up Talion, rolling a d6 for new hit points. A 5. Talion's hit point total increases to 32. Will he get any ability score increases? Let's find out. Strength 4. Intelligence a 6. Talion's intelligence increases to 15, which will aid his spellcasting. Wisdom 2. Talion's dexterity cannot increase further, so let's move on to Constitution. A 3. And Charisma 5. That was a good level up for the Bard. But more importantly, Talion also gets access to another 2nd level Bard spell. There are 3 remaining possibilities. Let's see what he has learnt. A 1. That's Earworm. When cast, the Bard's music gets stuck in the minds of anyone who can hear within a 30-foot radius. Such is the annoyance of the sensation that it is difficult to concentrate on any task that requires mental effort. Any intelligence-based tests are made at a -2 penalty for 24 hours. The Bard must play for 3 rounds to invoke the spell, and the Bard themselves are not affected. Anyone caught in the area of effect may make a save versus spell to resist. Okay then, I think that's enough of being behind the screen. Time to get back to the narrative. Chapter 61, Part 2, Day 61, Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged, except that Lena has received the miracle Cure Light Wounds and been restored to full health, and Talion's hit points have increased to 32. The companions stepped cautiously into the chamber, its heavy door hanging slightly ajar. Within, a long shadowed room stretched out before them, clearly designed for communal use. Closest to the mountainside wall stood a broad alcove housing a blackened hearth, cleverly constructed to vent the smoke through a narrow shaft leading outside. The scent of old ash still lingered faintly in the air. A large wooden table, weathered by time and hard use, dominated this end of the room, flanked by benches now layered in dust. To one side, a cluster of barrels and mouldering sacks slumped against the wall. Supplies, once meant to sustain life here, now rotting in silence. None of the companions had the stomach to investigate the contents too closely. The far end of the chamber was far less mundane. Here, 5 lecterns stood in deliberate formation, positioned precisely at the 5 points of a pentacle etched onto the stone floor, its lines carved deep and inscribed with purpose. Surrounding them, the walls were covered with shelves laden with decaying scrolls and manuscripts, many little more than crumbling shells. Valen moved naturally towards this ruined library, drawn by curiosity and inquisitiveness, while the others approached the lecterns. As they drew near, they noted the chamber's only other exit, a doorway leading back to the entrance hall. Lena's gaze fell upon the arcane arrangement of the lecterns. A chill prickled her skin. She reached for her holy symbol. Its familiar weight in her hand never ceased to comfort.
You saw it, did you not?
Talion had come to stand beside her, his eyes fixed, like hers, on the star-shaped formation. The cleric understood his meaning, yet something within her resisted an immediate reply.
So what?
A small, wry smile played at the bard's lips.
The rift, or worse, what lies beyond it?
Lena offered only the faintest nod. Talion turned at last to face her, and when she met his eyes, his expression was unreadable.
Despair not,
he said softly.
Some are born to dwell in the shadows, while most yearn for the light.
He paused, his gaze intensifying.
But a rare few, they are the light, and they shall drive out darkness wherever they find it.
Before Lena could respond to the compliment, Valen rejoined them, his face caught between disappointment and excitement, as though standing on the edge of revelation.
Little knowledge endures here,
he reported, voice tight with frustration.
The parchments crumble at the barest touch. Found you nothing at all?
Beric asked, hope clinging to his words.
Only this.
He raised a single scroll, its edges torn and darkened by time.
It speaks of a ritual.
A ritual? For what purpose?
Lena asked, her voice hushed.
That I cannot yet say. The scroll is damaged.
His tone was careful, but carried weight.
Then it's useless.
Beric turned away, waving a hand in dismissal.
Not so, Beric,
the mage said, with quiet intensity.
Though the purpose is obscured, the ritual itself is recorded in full. I may be able to discern its purpose with further consideration, but more than that, there are objects the ritual requires, and those we have already seen.
What objects? The warrior frowned. The talk of rituals was, for him, veering into uncomfortable territory. There was a flicker in Valen's eyes, something between revelation and warning.
The talks. The warden's talks.
Off mic, I rolled on my oracle to see whether there was anything of use to be found in this chamber, and the result was yes but. I then rolled on the mythic event meaning chart for a prompt to help me determine what it was. That result was Block Liberty, which led me to think that it was an artifact that could be used to seal or close something. That naturally led me to some kind of ritualistic magic. Of course, with that but on the oracle roll, I couldn't give my characters a free pass, so I decided that something about it needed to be incomplete. In that regard, there are two things missing. Firstly, as we have just heard, the purpose of the ritual is not completely clear. And secondly, while the 4 mummified wardens all have one of the required talks, the 5th, belonging to the Hell-Taken warden, is missing. I am going to make an intelligence test for Valen at a -2 penalty to see whether he makes the connection regarding the talks. The mage will need a 15 or less to succeed. A 5. But also, if the companions wish to take the 4 talks from the mummified wardens, then I wonder, would this cause them to rise in undeath? Time to ask the oracle. Okay then. Chapter 61, Part 3, Day 61, Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged. Leaving the chamber behind, the companions moved cautiously across the hall, their footfalls echoing against the ancient stone. With evening turning to night beyond the entrance, there was no longer any respite from the gloom, as they returned to the dormitory, the resting place of the 4 mummified wardens. Valen's mind churned. A section of the manuscript was missing, torn away, perhaps deliberately. He had lingered over the surviving runes, yet the ritual's purpose remained maddeningly elusive. Maybe with more time, its secrets might unfold. Then again, even if he could unlock its meaning, he may lack the craft to invoke it, should they have need. The greater mystery was the talks. Their presence in the manuscript suggested that the artifacts had been wrought by the wardens themselves. If that were true, then these long-dead men were more than guardians. They had been mages, and powerful ones at that. But why were the talks still about their throats in death? There was no time to ponder further. They had reached the dormitory once again. The heavy air was unchanged, dry, stale, and faintly metallic. The others looked at Valen with silent expectation. The mage stepped inside first, his senses sharpening. At once, he felt it again, the subtle, indescribable pull of arcane energy. The talks shimmered faintly in the gloom, their silver bands surrounded by a soft blue haze.
What now?
Beric's voice was low and wary. Callous Cledder gleamed faintly in his hand. Valen did not answer immediately. His eyes swept the room, trying to make sense of the puzzle.
In our homeland,
he began, gesturing towards Talion as he spoke.
Talks are not merely ornamental, though they do signify wealth and status. They are also believed to shield the wearer, a ward against malign forces. That is why warriors wear them into battle. I've heard of those warriors,
Beric interjected, a brow raised.
Knut told me they fight naked. Some do, yes.
Valen allowed himself a brief, dry smile, but his tone quickly turned serious again.
Earlier, I assumed the talks were binding these men, containing them, preventing their return as the rest was dead.
He paused, letting the silence stretch so the others might follow his reasoning.
But what if they are not keeping something in? What if they are keeping something out?
What do you mean, my love?
Lena stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. She saw it in his eyes then, the glimmer of discovery, the excitement of revelation in his eyes.
The creature that attacked us.
His voice dropped, thick with the memory of Lena's injury.
What if that was once the fifth warden? It wore no talk. Perhaps it was lost or removed. Without that protection, the corruption of this place might have taken hold, twisting him into the thing that we fought. How can you be sure?
Beric challenged, suspecting the mage was guessing.
I cannot.
Valen replied in a matter-of-fact tone. He turned towards the nearest corpse, but Lena caught his arm.
Do not.
Her eyes were pleading, her fear for him plain. He kissed her on the forehead, then drew back, giving her a reassuring smile.
There is only one way to know for certain. Trust me.
Inside, the mate was far from confident. Turning back, he reached down. The talk was cold to the touch, unnaturally so. The blue haze flared slightly as his fingers closed about the silver. A pulse met him, and for a moment he thought he heard a whisper coming from the band. Behind him, he could hear Lena softly intoning a prayer, perhaps in preparation should the dead begin to rise, but more likely because she feared for him. Valen's heart pounded with such intensity that he could hear it in his ears. His mind raced. If he was wrong, if his theory proved false, then the dead might rise, or else he may never wake again. At least, not as one of the living. He took a breath. Then, with quiet resolve, he lifted the torque free, and without hesitation, placed it around his own neck. My earlier oracle roll, asking whether the dead wardens would rise when the talks were removed, was a conclusive no and. I took that to mean that the talks are protective artifacts, which gave me an explanation for how the fifth warden became corrupted. With that in mind, the 4 talks grant the wearer a permanent effect equivalent to the 4th level homebrew miracle Soul Shield. This effect protects the wearer's soul from demonic and necromantic influences. As such, any saves against attacks which result in level drain, possession, soul loss, or stat loss are made with a +4 bonus. All that sounds good, but the fact that the wardens needed them in this place is worrying in the least. Chapter 61, Part 4, Day 61, Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged. The companions emerged from the grim dormitory, its stale air lingering in their nostrils. The moonstone's pale light illuminated their way as they returned to the entrance hall and advanced to its farthest extremity, where the pair of sturdy iron-bound doors barred their way. When Valen had placed the enchanted talk about his neck, a wave of clarity and vitality had surged through him, aligning his mind, body and spirit with reassuring harmony. He spoke of the sensation to the others, and having experienced no ill effects, he removed the other 3 from the remaining corpses and gave them one each to wear themselves. The doors in front of them were crafted of thick, time-darkened wood. A massive bolt, clearly meant to seal them from this side, hung open in its cradle, suggesting that someone, or something, had passed beyond and not returned. No sound could be heard from the other side, and so with nothing else for it, Beric stepped forward. His broad hands gripped the cold iron rings, and with a deep breath and a heave of strength, he pulled them open. As the moonstone's light spilled over the threshold, It illuminated a wide corridor, perhaps 20 feet across. The ceiling rose just high enough for Beric's tall frame to pass beneath without stooping, while the walls were etched with time-worn reliefs. The companions moved forward in single file, Beric leading the way. The big warrior proceeded with caution, remembering the trap that Canute had sprung in the Ulf-Hethnar lair. The carvings which lined the walls were disturbing. Twisted figures emerged from the stone, grotesque abominations that defied logic and nature. Some were impossible to fully comprehend, nightmare shapes beyond description. Others were obscene fusions of man and beast, warped mockeries of life, such as the manticore they had fought at Karak Ugul, and which claimed the life of Jenna. All seemed to spill outward from a central portal carved midway along the corridor. Some caught mid-emergence, as though crawling into the world from some hellish realm that had spawned them. It was impossible not to be affected by the hideous depictions, though none of the companions spoke, each holding their own counsel. In their hearts, they all understood what awaited them deeper in the vault, and some things were better left unsaid. The corridor ended at a stone door, surprisingly plain and unadorned, except for an imprint of a hand, fingers splayed, carved into the centre of its surface. Around the doorframe, words were inscribed into the stone, in a manner the companions had seen several times before.
Valen,
Beric called the mage forward. Valen stepped up beside the warrior to examine the portal, sensing the arcane energy which radiated from its surface, cloaking it like a shroud. Silently, his eyes traced across the script, before being drawn to the hand-shaped impression. There were traces of dark, dry blood in the hollow. His eyes darted, and his mind raced to decode the puzzle. Eventually, Valen drew his dagger, and brought it to rest upon the palm of his own hand.
what are you doing?
Beric asked sharply, reaching out to stay the mage's hand. Valen looked at him with impassive eyes.
The words,
he said by way of explanation, nodding at the frame.
Beyond this stone, the tear goes wide, where death and torment doth reside. 5 chained souls to Shadow's eye, bound in life, lest all things die. No key may turn to break this tomb, save blood of one whose oath is doom.
Beric furrowed his brow, clearly puzzled. Valen elaborated, his voice low and heavy with meaning.
I believe the 5 chained souls are the keepers of the Hellstones. If I am right, then the final line implies that only a keeper's blood can open this portal.
As he spoke, the air around him seemed to thicken, a weight settling on his shoulders, as though the verse itself pressed upon him.
Amos's spirit told me, though the Eye of Mordgun is not in my possession, it is bound to me, and I to it. For since his death, I have become its keeper.
He glanced down at Beric's hand, still gripping his arm, before meeting the warrior's eyes again with solemn finality.
You must let me do this.
Beric hesitated, then slowly nodded. He released the mage's arm, the tension in his grip fading into reluctant acceptance. Valen took a breath to steel himself, then quickly drew the blade across his hand.
Ah!
He grunted through clenched teeth, as blood welled up from the wound. Without pause, he reached forward and pressed his bleeding hand into the depression. The portal responded at once. A radiant light flared around the edges of the stone, casting sharp shadows on the monstrous relief. A grinding sound echoed along the corridor as the slab began to shift, stone scraping against stone, inch by inch, until the way stood open. And beyond the portal lay a staircase, descending into the darkness below, like a path into the abyss. Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show reach new listeners. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. I also have a range of merchandise, which can be found at www.redbubble.com/people/legendbones. All items are presented at zero markup. I make no money from them. It's purely to give something back to fans of the show. I'm also part of a collective known as the Solo Roleplayer Podcast Network. We bring you a curated list of the best, highest quality, most dramatic and diciest solo roleplay podcasts in the world. So why not check us out by rolling over to soloroleplayersnetwork.com. Finally, I'd love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones, at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone.
Are you ready for your next solo roleplay audio drama? Come and experience Roll, Ponder, and Play, a solo role-playing podcast dedicated to crafting compelling tales, thick with drama and danger, showcasing light against shadow, hope amidst sorrow, and determination beyond doubt, all from the barest of prompts. Come journey with me through realms of danger, shadow, and wonder at Roll, Ponder, and Play, where one roll can decide the fate of many things.